there is a common misconception that feminism is a newfound idea, something that women have just come up with very recently in history, where they've been able to break free from the shackles of womanhood and motherhood, and now they're able to do as they please, to pursue whatever career path they want, to dress however they want, and to be free and liberated from the bondage of being a woman and being a wife and a mother. Now, I want to present to you the simple fact that anyone who read the Bible, especially if they started from the beginning and read the story of Genesis, they would see that feminism is actually a very old idea. In fact, the first woman in history, Eve, was the first feminist. Let's explore this a little further. God created man, created woman, and put them in a garden. And he said, "This is your role, this is your life, do your job." And the woman found herself in a dialogue with the snake. Now, how the hell did that happen? Well, probably because she was very independent, and she wanted to venture out and meet some new folks who can teach her a thing or two about the real world. Well, the snake was quick to tell Eve that God was actually playing a big con on Adam and Eve. And the fact that he told them not to eat from the tree of knowledge of good and evil was really his attempt to limit them, because if they were to eat from it, they would be like God, and they would know good and evil. And then they would be so wise and so enlightened, and they wouldn't be stuck in this little garden that God locked them in. So let's see how the dialogue between the snake and the woman plays out. This is Genesis chapter 3, verses 5 and 6. And the snake tells Eve, "For God knows that on the day that you eat from it, from the tree, then your eyes will be opened, and you will be like God, knowing good and evil." Verse 6, "And the woman saw that the tree was good for eating, and that it was a temptation for the eyes, and that the tree was desirable to become wise. So she took from its fruit, and she ate." And so what happened? This woman, who was created as a helpmate for the man, is now venturing into the realm of knowledge and wisdom, where she can talk to a snake and eat from the tree that God told her not to eat from. And now that's what's desirable to her, and that's what's tempting to her. And so she goes and eats from it. The verse concludes, "And she gave also to her husband with her, and he ate." And now look at Adam's response, the first male feminist. All that had to happen was for his wife to say, "Here, eat the fruit." And he immediately ate it. Yes, babe. Yes, honey. Whatever she says, whatever the wife says. A complete denial of God and his commandments, and a complete subjugation to the woman and her whims. And so here you have the first example in all of mankind of a woman wanting to be like God, wanting to be something that she's not, wanting to do something that God doesn't want her to do. But she finds that to be her source of power, and she goes ahead and eats from the tree that God tells her not to, on the advice coming from a snake. And then her husband goes and eats right out of her hand. Now this trend continues on till today. Women misbehaving, acting incorrectly, acting on the basis of guidance that they receive from snake-like creatures, and men immediately bending the knee and allowing their women to get away with anything, because whatever the woman says must be right. Now, what does God say? Because that's really what's of importance here. So let's look back to where God created the woman and what God even had in mind for the woman to be. This is Genesis chapter 2, verse 20. God created a solitary man, a single man, and he said it was not good for man to be alone. And so originally he brought for him all of the animals to see if they were companions. And the man called names to all of the animals, and to the birds of the heavens, and to all the beasts of the field. But for the man he did not find a helpmate corresponding to him. And it was at that point that God put a deep sleep upon the man, and then built the woman out of the side of the man. And so the creation of the woman was the creation of a being that can be a corresponding companion and a helper for the man, created from the man for the man. And they are therefore for each other, because God made the species of man, male and female, together. But what is the role of a helper? What is the role of a helpmate? It is to be a supportive partner and a nurturing feminine being that provides companionship and help to the man. Now, I didn't make this up. I didn't make the world this way. That's how it is. And the more that you live life, you come to realize that life is how it is. And God is the one who sets the terms for these things. And so when God gives the woman the role of being the helpmate for the man, of being the feminine companion for the masculine male, and the woman doesn't like that very much. And so she goes and finds companions who are not her husband, and finds knowledge that God does not want her to have. That is the example of the first feminist. Because that's what feminism is. It's a denial of reality. It's a denial of nature. It's a denial of responsibility, and it's a denial of God. Because God created the human condition in the way that he did. And he created the nature of the man and the nature of the woman as he did. And a man finds his grace and his greatness and his valor in being courageous, being a strong masculine protector and provider. And a woman finds her grace and her valor and her glory in being a mother and being a supportive feminine partner for her man. Now, when we deny the order and the structure that God put into reality, things only go downhill from there, because nature doesn't change. So if we're at war with nature, all we do is experience constant dread and sorrow, and the sadness and the struggle of being what we are and not wanting to be what we are. And so when you look at the punishments that God gave to the man and the woman after driving them out of the Garden of Eden, you start to get an idea of what things look like when we rebel against God and deny the structure and the commandments that he puts in place. Genesis chapter 3, verse 16. To the woman he said, God said, I will greatly multiply your sorrow and your pregnancy. In sorrow you shall birth children, and to your man will be your craving, and he shall rule over you. Well, look what happens. The mother of all life, she's still going to have to birth. She's still going to be giving birth to those children. But now it's going to be in sorrow. Now it's going to be difficult. She's still going to be submissive to her husband. She's still going to be the woman in this relationship. But now her husband actually rules over her, and her craving is towards him, yet he rules over her. So it goes from being a blessing to being a mother and a wife, to becoming a pain and a sorrow and a subjugation and a submission that's not coming from a place of beauty and not coming from a place of appreciation, but coming from a place of sadness and defeat. Now that's just sad, because why did that happen? It happened because the woman denied the position that God put her in. She was not happy with being a mother. She was not happy with being a wife. And so now she was going to experience the pain and the sorrow as a result of her denial of God. And what does God tell the man? The man who suffered weakness by caving to his wife instead of listening to God. Genesis chapter 3, verse 17. And to the man he said, because you listened to the voice of your wife, and you ate from the tree that I commanded you not to eat from it, cursed is the ground on your account. In sorrow you shall eat of it all the days of your life. In sorrow you shall eat from the ground. Verse 18. Thorns and thistles I will grow for you, and you will eat the grass of the field. 19. By the sweat of your brow you will eat bread until you return to the ground, for from it you are taken, for you are dust, and to dust you shall return. We were always dust. We were always going to have to work. But now it becomes a curse, and now it becomes a burden, and now it becomes sorrowful, because you listen to the voice of your wife, says God to the man. How could you listen to the voice of your wife when it flies in the face of God's clear commandments? What happens as a result of weakness is your burden now is increased. Now, instead of taking on responsibility from a place of courage and honor, now you have to work the field by the sweat of your brow in sorrow. But Adam and Eve had some good takeaways from all of this. And I think it's very important that we see what was Adam's recognition after this and what was Eve's recognition after this. So it says here in Genesis chapter 3, verse 20, and the man called the name of his wife Chava, Eve, for she had become the mother of all living. The man recognized that he was ascribing some sort of weird label to his wife that would cause him to go and eat right out of her hand in direct opposition to God's commandment. At this moment, he recognized, wait, let's label this woman correctly. She's the mother of all living. How could we have lost our way so much to get so caught up in all of the esoteric concepts of wisdom and knowledge of good and evil to be like God? What about to be like man? What about to be human beings? What about to be fathers and mothers? And so he turned to his wife and he said, you are the mother of all living. That's what you really are. That's your true nature. And let's go with that as our mission statement when we set out to populate the earth. And Eve had a very similar understanding after this event. Genesis chapter 4, verse 1, and the man knew Eve his wife, and she conceived, and she gave birth to Cain. And she said, I have acquired a man with Yahweh. Suddenly it hit her. This was her power all along. She acquired a man with Yahweh. She engaged in the process of birthing life into existence, the most powerful superpower that we can conceive of. She went through that process with Yahweh and acquired a man with God himself, because that's the power of a mother. That's what she can do when she's focused on her purpose. And she's not chasing these false dreams, these dreams of destruction that society says, oh, you got to go and become an astrophysicist. You got to go and become a CEO and a lawyer. And they start placing all of these labels and false value on things that are not even important. Because a woman could acquire a man with God himself. She can take part in the process of creation. And that is her true glory. That is her true praise, that she can be the mother of all living. Now let's just remember just how powerful the wisdom that women have to offer is. And when God tells Adam, you are cursed because you listened to your wife, That's because Adam listened to his wife to go against God. However, if a woman can speak the truth and can actually say what God does want, in that case, God will actually say to listen to the woman. And so take this story with Abraham and Sarah, where Sarah had given birth to Isaac, and she saw that Ishmael, who was the son of the maidservant Hagar, he was an older boy, she saw that he was mocking and scoffing, and she didn't like the influence that he was having on Isaac, and she didn't think that having his presence around was good for the development of her child. And so she told Abraham, please get rid of this maidservant and her son. And it says that the matter was very bad in the eyes of Abraham. He didn't want to do it because it was his son. But then God tells him, Genesis chapter 21, verse 12, and God said to Abraham, it shall not be bad in your eyes over the youth and over the maidservant. All that Sarah says to you, listen to her voice. For in Isaac I will call your seed, your offspring. Listen to what Sarah says. Listen to her voice. And so now you see the inverse of what we see in Genesis. Cursed are you because you listen to the voice of your wife. Here, God is saying, listen to the voice of your wife. What is the difference? Is what she's saying the truth? Is what she's saying the will of God, or does it go against the will of God? As men and women, we have so much to offer each other. What men have, women don't have. What women have, men don't have. We are quite literally not a complete unit without each other. As God says, leave your father and mother, cling to your woman, and become one flesh. That's what he tells the man. That's the fundamental nature of male and female, together, united. What gets in the way of that is serpentine logic, is a snake trying to turn women against God, and men being weak in the face of their wife's betrayal. We can't afford this weakness. We can't afford this deviance from God's path. The minute these things happen, we're instantly cursed. We're instantly existing in sorrow, and our roles become a pain, and they become a burden, and we become distanced from the Garden of Eden, from the place of bliss and goodness that God created by his own hand. When we start to infuse our own agendas and our own ideas about how things should be, that's us trying to be like God. That's us trying to meddle with his creation. Men saying that they don't want to take on the role of being powerful men who enforce the laws of God, and women saying that they don't want to take on the role of being submissive feminine wives who are helpers for their husbands and are mothers for their children. Well then, guess what happens? Everything falls apart, little by little, until we're left with families broken, marriages not surviving, children who don't have fathers and mothers, and a world that lacks the love and the family and the connections that are so needed. And that could truly only happen under the laws of God. So let us return to the nature that he has created us with, to the creation that he proclaims to be very good. And despite what we may think about it, and despite our struggles with it, we cannot stop following the path that God made, because that's where goodness is found. I want to conclude with the words of Solomon, King Solomon, who had quite a bit of experience himself with many, many women. And he saw the unrighteousness that women can come to the point that it even brought him down. And in the last chapter of Proverbs, he writes a poem and a song about what a truly righteous woman of valor is. And one of the concluding verses is so beautiful. I'll read it to you here. Proverbs chapter 31, verse 30. Grace is deceitful, and beauty is vain. A woman who fears God, she is praiseworthy.